Hello and welcome to episode 236 of Page One, the Writers' Podcast. I'm Tarek.
I'm Marco, and thanks for joining us on the podcast where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, find out how they got into the industry and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. And we've got a huge back catalogue of guests there. So if you are just joining us for the first time, please do check out the back catalogue because we've had some absolutely phenomenal authors, screenwriters, video game writers, and many, many more on the podcast. So please do look at that if you haven't already. But this week we're joined by a fantasy author, Intisar Khanani, who has had an interest in publishing journey, it's fair to say. She was indie published, then it got picked up by Trad, and then has gone back to indie because, I don't think out of a particular choice, but that's just the way things have gone. But, I think, as we discussed in the episode, that experience at indie helped her, that first experience at indie helped her be sure that she could do that again, at the other end of the Trad bit of it all. So it's an interesting chat. And obviously we also talk about, fantasy that isn't your typical medieval European type of fantasy. And I think, we've had a few guests on now that are doing that sort of thing. It's definitely growing.
Yeah, it does feel like a slight shift is coming, right? Because, I'm not someone who reads a lot of fantasy, but I'm always grateful to see, like, that kind of Lord of the Rings type classic fantasy is probably my least favourite type. So I love seeing new types of fantasy, cross genres with fantasy, with modern stuff, or etc. That anything different, I'm a big fan of. So it's quite nice to see this new stuff coming in.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll get into the episode. I just want to mention before we do that we do have a Patreon that you can support us on. You can get early access to episodes, get bonus episodes, like our guests staying behind and telling us about 5 books that influenced them. That is a Patreon exclusive if you want to see stuff like that. So, and also there are lots of other benefits on there as well. So please do check out the Patreon if you haven't already, because it really does support the podcast and helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast. In addition, we are part of a podcast network, Step Podcasts, where you can follow Step Podcasts on Blue Sky or Instagram. Or indeed on YouTube, and you'll get our shows. You'll also get the shows that Nadine Matheson produces as well, and our joint show, Adventures in Publishing Land, as well, which is a look at the latest publishing news. So please do check that out if you haven't already. But enough from me. I think it's about time we get into the episode after a quick advert.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realise it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
did you always want to be a writer?
Yes, I definitely did. I was one of those kids who would, staple their books together and illustrate them with crayon when I was 4. And the first book I remember writing was one of those stapled books, and it was about a little fish who wanted to go to school. Apparently, I was very much into the puns at that age. But yeah, I've been writing on and off for most of my life. I've taken 2 or 3 years off here and there for, life circumstances. But it's just been kind of part of the fabric of my life.
Excellent. And I think I'm right in saying that, when you were growing up, you traveled about a lot as well. Did that expose you to lots of different types of stories or different stories, different authors, things like that?
It didn't as much as I would have liked. Like looking back, I'm like, really? I didn't, why didn't I, why didn't I read more of this or that? And I think part of it was the constraints of, I was raised in an English-speaking household. My parents spoke Urdu, but they always assumed we would move back to Pakistan, which is where they're from. So I was born in the U.S. And so they were like, well, let's teach our kids English, and then they'll pick up Urdu when we go home. Well, we never went home, right? So I have only kind of a passing grasp of any other language. And so a lot was dependent on what was translated that I could access. But the travel growing up really, really opened my eyes. We lived in Saudi Arabia. I went to an international school that had over 70 nationalities represented. We traveled because we were in Saudi and my dad worked for an airline. We got free standby tickets.
Oh, nice.
Because these were the old days back in the 80s. Right? And so, we went to different parts of Africa, Europe. The first place I remember seeing snow was in Seoul, Korea, right? Like,
Wow.
So we traveled all these places. I knew all these people. And even though I wasn't experiencing storytelling, I was seeing the beauty of the world and its incredible diversity. And then I would pick up the books that were available to me, and none of that was on the page.
Yeah.
Not only was I not there, but my best friends weren't there. The people down the street weren't there. None of us existed except for a small slice. And for some reason that was the only thing that made it to the page. And so as I grew up and I hit my teen years, I wanted to start writing the people I knew, and not necessarily specific people, but just these cultures, these experiences. And I had to teach myself how to put people on the page who weren't white. Like the first stories I wrote were all white people, because that's all I saw. So it was definitely, I think if I hadn't had the experience I had growing up, I wouldn't have felt as comfortable working to present different cultures and experiences and seeing their lack on the page from the get-go.
Yeah, because I think you say, it's on your website, you write mighty girls and diverse worlds. And it does seem to me that the fantasy scene in particular, other fields as well, but the fantasy scene in particular is where I've noticed that it does seem to have opened up in recent years in terms of diversity. Because, everyone, I think even 10 years ago, if you'd ask people what's a fantasy story, they would think Lord of the Rings, they would think that sort of medieval European setting.
Yep. Or Harry Potter.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still centering that European or white experience. Yeah.
So, I mean, do you see that? Do you think that is a real thing, that there has been this explosion?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it is due to a lot of people working very consciously on it. We need diverse books movement. We had a lot of, that was that particular group did amazing work, but there were lots of other folks also working towards raising awareness that that representation was both vital and missing, and definitely seeing a big shift in the last 10 years. So my first book, I indie published because I couldn't get any interest in it. And it was, I indie published it in 2012. And in 2016, that movement had kind of taken off, and people were more aware. And I had this, kind of roundabout experience of having an agent contact me who picked up my book off a sale and loved it and wanted what I was doing, wanted to bring that to the mainstream. And then she took that book to, you know, the editors in New
Yeah,
York,
yeah.
and I got a book deal on a book that I couldn't get agents to look at, 6 years before, because they didn't know what to do with it. So definitely a major shift in how people think about and approach diverse stories.
Yeah, no, like as I say, it seems to be noticeable, when I go into a bookshop, or when you're seeing the authors being spoken about and things like that. But
Yeah.
you never know if these things are sort of surface level only, or if it is actually making a deeper penetration into the publishing ecosystem. But it does seem to
Yeah.
be a bit.
And I think we're going to kind of see the truth of it in these next few months, because the U.S. at least is in a place where diversity, equity, inclusion are not necessarily valued anymore. And so companies that were just towing the line and providing lip service, oh, okay, we need to publish more diverse books because, otherwise we're going to look bad. Oh, we don't have to worry about that anymore. And there is a shift in publishing right now. And so it's just kind of a waiting game to see how it shakes out. But I do think the readership is very aware now and very there. And I think that is going to make a huge difference.
Hopefully, ultimately, that matters, because as publishers, at the end of the day, they only care about the bottom line. So, if the readership is asking for it, then hopefully it will continue. It always makes me laugh when, I think it was a year or two ago, that James Patterson came out and said it was getting very difficult for straight white men to publish a book these days, which was just something incredible.
Oh
to
my
say.
gosh. Yeah. Oh
but
no. Well, and that's what a loss of privilege feels like.
yeah,
You feel like you've lost something when really it's just that, people who
are just being
routinely
brought
didn't
up.
have were being brought up to a closer to you, not even on the same
No.
playing field, but just a little bit closer. And it's like, oh, well, I'm the victim now. And it's like, sorry, my friend, that's not how that works.
Yeah, exactly. But if we can jump back, to when you started writing these stories and stuff, I just wondered when did you start to, you had those books that you stapled together and things, but when did you actually think, I'm going to try and do this seriously? When did that come?
Was when I was in university. I was in uni, and it was my senior year, and I had a 20-hour job, and I was doing overload of credits because I had transferred schools, and I was like, well, I've always wanted to write a book. What am I waiting for?
No
Apparently
excuses.
time was not the answer. And so I set myself a goal to write a chapter a week, and wrote my first book, Thorn, over the course of that year. And I joke that the way I became a writer was naivety, because I was like, well, I'm going to retell a fairy tale. That way I already have a plot. All I have to do is write the story. How hard can it be?
Famous last words.
Oh my gosh. I will never forget when I finished that draft, and I printed it out at my school computer lab, as one did in those days. And I sat down to read it on my bed, and it was so boring. I almost fell asleep. I literally was like falling asleep over my own book, and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to revise this.
But you did revise it, and then you said you self-published it, but before that, did you try and do the usual, send it out to agents and all of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I did. And I think what's really interesting looking back is that, most people write to publish, and for whatever reason, I was just writing to write at the beginning. And so that book was called Thorn, and I went through maybe 7 or 8 rounds of revisions just for myself over the course of maybe that many years. And in the same time frame, I wrote 5 or 6 other books just for fun, just because I had these ideas and I wanted to write them. And then I knew that someday I wanted to be an author, but it felt like a faraway thing. And I was really just writing to kind of write the stories I wanted to write. I don't even want to say to learn my craft. Like, I don't think it was that conscious.
Yeah. No, it was just that's what you wanted to do.
I
Yeah,
wanted to write these stories, so
uh-huh.
I did. And then in 2012, around 2010 or so, 2009, maybe, I started trying to shop Thorn around agents, and I didn't get any bites. It was definitely my most polished work. Um, and then in 2012, I had a toddler. I was pregnant with my second kid, and I wanted to come home from work and just spend time with my kids. I know this time was kind of precious. They were
Yeah.
only going to be young so long. And I was like, well, I have to have something for myself or I will go bonkers. I am not the kind of person who can be home with their family all day, every day and be a nice person.
Mhm.
I,
Yeah.
I need something for me, and then I'm a much nicer person. And so I was like, I think I'll launch my writing career. So I was 8 months pregnant, and I published Thorn, and, self-published it. And then I had 2 kids, and I was like, oh, this is a different world.
Yeah.
But I made the commitment, so I kept writing and publishing, and here I am.
But with that self-publishing, obviously, it is something that became easier, and now
Yeah.
is a route into
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
publishing for many people. But I think it's fair to say there are different levels of doing it, and how seriously people take it and all of that
Mhm.
sort of stuff. I mean, what
Yeah.
did you do anything? Did you get an editor? Did you pay someone for a book cover? How,
So when I
yeah.
first indie published Thorn, I did I uh I paid for a proofreader. I
Mhm.
had done so many rounds with beta readers, and that I kind of said, okay, I'm going to pretend that I crowdsourced my editor.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I had a proofreader, and I paid for a cover, and I set up my website, and I was like, okay, we're going to try this thing. And it was not a smashing success by any measure. I think I sold 20 or 30 copies at launch,
Hmm.
which it was a great start for me.
Hmm.
But it was a very modest start. And I think I had to learn a lot. I went through 2 or 3 different covers. I had to keep changing the book description. And then around 2014, I got a beautiful cover. I finally figured out like the marketing aspects, and Thorn really took off. And I had started indie publishing my second series at that point, and I was
Hmm.
treating Thorn as a standalone. Um, and it was the early days of indie publishing, and so I think that visibility, if you actually had a good product that was professionally packaged, was not that hard to get. Now I feel like it's much more challenging.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah,
So
it's
I was
definitely a flooded
pretty
market
lucky
now.
with my timing. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And then, as you say, an agent ends up approaching you based on the
Yeah.
success of that, presumably. Yeah.
Yeah. They picked Thorn up off of a BookBub sale, and read it and reached out to me, and then when they signed me, they went in, and this is, again, it was so backwards. They went into a lunch with an editor from Harper Teen, and they were talking about other books.
Hmm.
And as they were catching up before the meat of their conversation, she mentioned how excited she was to sign me, and that she'd read my book that she'd bought on the sale. And that editor went home and bought the book and read it, and then called up my editor and said, I want this book and I want this author. And so I was
That's the dream stuff. That's
and
what you
it
want.
kind of
Yeah.
is. I was like, is this real? I don't think this, I'm pretty sure this is not how this is supposed to work, right?
But
So,
it's a great example, isn't it, of that sort of overnight success thing.
yeah.
It wasn't an overnight
It
success. You
wasn't
put all
right.
this, you'd put yourself in that position with all the
Yeah.
hard work beforehand to then have that what looked like sudden success, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and it was very like serendipitous in the way it
Yeah.
happened. And I think that's but yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of work to get there and it continues to be a lot of work now.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think, serendipity is something that we talk about in the podcast a lot. I think that's true of self-publishing, of trad publishing, of everything. And
Yeah.
even trad published books that have huge marketing budgets sometimes can disappear without a trace, whereas others can just, land at the right time, get one review that suddenly boosts it,
Yeah.
things like that.
Something takes, yeah.
Luck plays a big part. You need to write a good book as well, generally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Like all
luck
the
plays a big
basics have
part.
to be there, and then
Yeah.
there's things that are just out of your control.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And as you said, Thorn has become part of a series, but you had then started on the Sunbolt series.
Yeah.
And as we record this podcast, the new book, The Debts of Fire, which I think is that the third one in the
Yeah, it's
in
a third
Sunbolt?
of 4 books, so there'll be one more after this.
Right.
But yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the series and Debts of Fire itself?
Sure. So the Sunbolt Chronicles was another series that I started writing without any intention of publishing. And I wrote Sunbolt. I wrote it in part because there were all of these YA tropes that I just couldn't stand. And I decided that I was going to write them with respect, and then I was going to turn them on their heads, right? Like, you know? And so it was really just like something that I wrote for myself to have fun with things. Um, and once I had the first book, I was like, actually, this is really fun and I enjoy it, and I think I want to share this. But it features, Hitomi. She's my street thief orphan with a magical secret, all of the things, right? And she is, in the first book, she volunteers to help a noble family escape execution because, like, what is the most noble thing that a street thief magical orphan can do, right? And of course, she's betrayed, and she's betrayed to the dark mage who killed her father. And so it's very much a out of the frying pan into the fire kind of story, but on repeat. She's I like to call her my disaster child. She is like she's got a wonderful sense of humor. She is, wears her heart on her sleeve. She's out there to help everyone, and she is terrible, absolutely terrible at planning. And so you see her and she's like, all right, we're gonna do this, and you're like, oh child, oh no. And that I feel like that's very true to being a teen, right? Like you don't see all the ramifications. You do work on impulse and with the best of intentions, and you're smart. It's not that you're not smart.
Yeah.
And so it's been a lot of fun to write. Hitomi is also a third culture kid, so this is kind of where the diverse stories aspect. I really kind of dove deep into both kind of like into cultural diversity. So she is biracially, if she were in our world, Japanese Arab. And both of her heritages play into who she is, and they play into her experiences over the series. And then she is a third culture kid, which means she's a product of 2 different cultures, and she's growing up in a third culture. Which in this case, when we open, she's in her adopted homeland, which is based off of historic Stone Town, Zanzibar. And so she's kind of, it's been really neat to write her experience because it's very much my own experience, which is that, no matter where you go, you don't fit in. There's always some indicator that you don't belong. And at the same time, you fiercely claim every place you go is home, right? And home is just such an important concept to you. And home is this also variable thing, right? Like home is where you put your head at night. It's where your family is from. It's where you grew up. It's where you want to go. It's all of these things at the same time. And so Hitomi has just been such a delight to write, because I get to write that aspect of my experience, which I don't see a lot of in fantasy, especially, but just even generally in the genre and literary in literature. But she does, over the course of her story, her arch nemesis, this dark mage, is a forerunner of colonial invasion.
Right.
And so over the course of the story, she's traveling through the connected kingdoms that span kind of Africa, Asia, like Middle East and Eastern Asia, and building alliances and learning her strengths as she has to face down this colonial invasion that's coming.
Cool.
So, yeah.
And you said it's three of four books. Was
Yeah,
that?
I keep getting scared because people are like the trilogy, and I'm like, oh no, there's another
Well,
one.
I know that's there's a thing, isn't it? People's heads, it just goes to three for some reason in these stories.
Which is fair. I mean, trilogies
Yeah.
are a big thing.
Yeah.
But
Although, fantasy series sometimes have like 15 or whatever. So,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
knows?
yeah.
But I always wonder about that with these sort of big sprawling stories like that. And you said at the start you wrote this for yourself. It was something you wanted to explore. And did you always have this sort of larger arc in mind, or was you focused on the first book when you first started?
No, I had the larger arc in mind. It has changed a lot since I started. I actually thought I was writing a novella serial.
Right.
Which is, again, the naivety of the author, right? Like, oh, I just have like 5 or 6 short stories, and then it'll be done. No. No. So Sunbolt itself is actually it's a short novel length. And then each book after that is quite chunky. And it's still following the general arc that I envisioned, but the story's grown so much in the writing of it.
Yeah.
That in some ways it's like, oh, is this even the same thing?
and do you other things that have come up when we've had other people that have written series like this is that often the first book is fun because you are setting up it's fun, and there's pros and cons to each, isn't there? But you're setting up the world. You can set out anything you want in a way, but also you have to put in all that effort to build that world in that first book.
Yeah.
Whereas in the later books, that's sort of established already, and you can just get on with telling the story. But at the same time, we've often heard that in trilogies, anyway, the middle book is the one that people enjoy the least because you need to raise the stakes. Yeah, you need to raise the stakes on book one, but you can't have the big bad at the end of it because there's still a whole other book, and you have to set up all these threads still to go into the finale, if you like. I mean, how have you found that? Do you find writing in these series there's peaks and troughs of what's easy, what's difficult?
There are definitely peaks and troughs. I think for me, so I am definitely more on the intuitive writer side of things, where while I do a certain amount of planning, a lot of each book is also getting in there and just figuring it out one step at a time. And so there's a wonderful kind of discovery process to writing whichever book it is. And I have learned that if I am bored, then the reader will be bored. So I skip those parts or I set something on fire. And just, find a way to change what I'm doing. But I found, so for example, Debts of Fire is a very different book and flavor from Sunbolt and Memories of Ash. And both of those books, Debts of Fire is also somewhat fast-paced, but both of those books are kind of fast-paced adventure stories. Hitomi is, she's running for her life in Sunbolt. In Memories of Ash, she sets off to rescue her mentor from unjust imprisonment and has to basically plan and execute a jailbreak. And again, she's really bad at planning, so this is great. But over the course of those 2 books, she is racking up a certain amount of trauma. And she, in book 3, has to kind of face the impact that has had on her. Even as she goes about, the premise in book 3 is that in book 2, she crossed paths with the Phoenix in this kind of cursed lands, and he helped her escape. And he was like, "You owe me, you got to come back." And she's like, "Okay, fine. I'm probably going to die anyhow before then. Off I go." And, and she goes off and rescues her mentor. The Phoenix, is waiting for her. And so in book 3, she returns to these cursed lands like, "Oh gosh, I'm still alive. I guess I gotta go pay my debts."
These, debts of fire. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so she's facing a lot of impossible situations, and she doesn't know how she's going to survive them. And she has to kind of wrestle with her own valuation of her life and her own grief and sense of abandonment from her family. And so that made the book really hard for me to write. That I find what's harder for me than book 1, 2, 3 is what is the emotional thread through the book.
Right. Okay.
And this had a really heavy one, and I didn't want the book to feel really heavy. And at the same time, the world has been burning down, and I have a lot of grief and a lot of rage. And so it was really hard to sit down and write that and then get up and look around and still see that, and then find a way to treat it gently and with love in this book.
Yeah, no, I can see
yeah.
that. And when you wrote your first books yourself, you sort of, as you say, crowdfunded the editing, as it were, or crowdsourced the editing rather. But now you are with a publisher, and I just wondered how that has affected, if it has, your process or your drafting or anything like that.
Yeah. So actually right now I'm not really with a publisher.
Okay.
So I did Thorn, and then it was picked up as we talked about, and then I wrote a companion duology that kind of completed that series, or continued that series. And the first book in that was called The Theft of Sunlight, and that was also picked up. And then my publisher did not pick up the second book in the duology, which was kind of a bummer because the first book ended on a cliffhanger. Now, my British publisher, God love them, did pick up the whole thing. So they actually provided the editing on the third book.
Right.
And they were amazing. They're hotkey books, and I love them. And so that third book was kind of a hybrid situation for me, where my British publisher brought it out kind of worldwide, and I retained North American rights.
Right.
And I brought it out through a small kind of indie co-op called Snowy Wings Publishing. And they look front-facing, they look like a small press, and we're able to work with library distributors and get trade reviews and stuff like that. But backward facing, we are all just a whole bunch of indie authors who are working together in collaboration, but we're publishing our own books. So through them, I did, when I started publishing the Sunbolt Chronicles, I did hire a line editor, but and then I continued with my proofreader. And that's pretty much what I continue to do now, but I have a very intensive beta reading method that involves 2 or 3 rounds of beta reads. And so I really still approach it as crowdsourcing my editor. I would love to work with an editor again at some point. I really enjoyed it when I worked with on the Dauntless Path books on Thorn and its follow-ups. But it's just kind of but you kind of do what you can afford to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And did you, how as well, you said earlier that you obviously 2 kids is a lot. Yeah, I know. I can vouch for that. But I just wondered where you squeezed the writing in. do you have set times when you want to write every day, or how does
Yeah.
that work?
Well, I've just come off the best year of my life. So, up until last year, I was homeschooling.
Right.
And so my kids did take classes at a local school for homeschoolers. They were a la carte. They were not all day, every day. They were certain days of the week for a few hours.
Mm.
And so I would pretty much squeeze my writing into whenever my kids were not my official responsibility. And then last year they were both in regular school, and that was mind blowing. It's like there's so much time in the day. But it was also weird because I really missed my kids, and I like my husband would be like, I can pick them up from school, and I'd be like, no, I'm picking them up only if I'm sick. But this year my eldest, who is in high school, will be going back to homeschooling.
Right.
It just didn't work well for her last year. So it'll be interesting because she's older now. You're more able to say, okay, well, you're going to do homework. I'm going
Yeah.
to do my work, and it's going to be fine. It's definitely helped that writing is more flexible. There are not particular times I have to be at my computer, except for things like this. But yeah, it is very much a juggling act, especially when they were younger, when they were homeschooling.
Mm-hmm. And when you said as well, sorry, I'm jumping about here, but you have the Sunbolt series.
Mm-hmm.
Thorn was standalone, but then
Mm-hmm.
that became the Dauntless series.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, how was it? Well, first of all, was it the publisher picking that up that made you go back to that series? And how was it revisiting that series after you'd started a different series?
Yeah. So I had wanted to write that companion duology for Thorn, and I had written a short story kind of featuring the main character called The Bone Knife. And I wrote the first draft of it, and it was broken, and I couldn't figure it out. And I was like, you know what? No one's waiting for this book. I'm going to go write something else. And so I switched over to the Sunbolt Chronicles. So when I got the offer for Thorn, they were basically like, we want that, but we also want something original. So they wanted a 2-book deal. At which point I was like, I think I'm far enough along that I can now figure out what was not working in that companion story and write that. And so it was absolutely not exciting to edit Thorn again. I was so done with that book. I was like, oh my God, not again. But it was worth it. And it was interesting going back, because even in the 3 or 4 years that I had been away from it, I had continued to learn so much about what I was doing. And then I think what was hard was switching gears away from Hitomi and knowing that I was going to have to put that series on hold for a little while. And so I had Sunbolt and Memories of Ash. The first 2 books were already out in 2016, 2017 when I signed the deal with Harper Teen. And unfortunately had to put the Sunbolt Chronicles on hold while I revised Thorn and then published The Theft of Sunlight and A Darkness at the Door. And so that's why once The Darkness was out, I was like, all right, it's time to relaunch Sunbolt because it needs a new start, and finish this series. So I'm really excited to be sharing this 3rd book, and to be planning out the 4th one, and the goal is to get that book out before I do any of my other pet projects that I have waiting in the wings.
Yeah, and with now that the onus is back on you in many ways in terms of the getting the book out there, getting it known, and things like that. I mean, is that an additional? Some authors seem to enjoy that part of it. Some authors would rather not touch it at all. I mean, how do you cope with that bit of it?
I think I think it is nice to have some flexibility, especially with, with having kids, with a lot of homeschooling. Um, Sometimes caregiving just takes over your life, and you need to be able to shift things without feeling like you're breaking your contract. Um, but I do try and set myself deadlines, and I'll book my editors, or I'll make a promise to my beta reading team or whatever. At which point, like, I do have that outward accountability, and that helps me a lot. I think a lot of people struggle with not having that accountability. So I just kind of manufacture it for myself.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
But I do. It's really interesting going through the publishing process with a traditional publisher once you've indie published, or with that indie publishing experience, because in some ways it's like, well, I still have to do the same hustle. Like, I'm still my own marketing department, like, rather, and yes, they have a marketing department. When Harper-Teen gave me their marketing plan for Thorn, they were literally, one of their bullet items was, "We will retweet your release tweet." And I'm like, "You're going to retweet me? This is your marketing plan?" Like,
oh my God.
Why am I working with you?
Yeah.
Like, we'll put you in our catalog. Well, if you don't, you shouldn't be in publishing, because, like, that's what a catalog is, right? Like, it's a list.
Yeah.
So my marketing plan from my publisher was very bare bones, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And so it was good to have indie publishing experience, and to be able to be like, I know how to do my own hustle. I'm not the best at anything I do, but at least I have, experience. I have some idea of what I need to do and how to do it, and I can kind of chug along and work at it. And I think that I would have been devastated had I not had indie publishing when they didn't pick up my third book, because I wouldn't have known how to navigate it. And instead I was like, whatever, I can do this.
Yeah, no, but there is a skill to it, I think, in it. With indie publishing as well, do you feel under, you talked about getting self-imposed deadlines and stuff like that, but a lot of the indie authors that we have spoken to also seem to feel under pressure to publish more quickly than
I don't
a
do
trad
that.
publishing schedule. You don't do that. Stay away from that.
I can't do that,
Yeah.
just for my own physical health and my own mental health. So I have felt that pressure probably in my early days of indie publishing, when they were like, you should do a book a month. And I was like, I cannot even do a short story a month. Like, what are you talking about? I think a lot of it was kind of just having to make peace with the fact that my process is what it is, and I will continue to improve it and make it more efficient as I can. But I will never, my best pacing that I've been able to manage was a book a year, and that's okay. And that I made myself physically sick. So probably I shouldn't do I actually gave myself stress-induced shingles.
Oh my God.
Which is awful, and it was across my eye, so it was terrible.
Yeah, so maybe
do not
maybe
recommend.
slow that
10 of
pace
10
down.
do not do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where I've kind of learned, is like, all right, I usually try and give myself about a year and a half. And I know that's not the recommended thing. It's not any of the strategies, but I have to be realistic about what I can do and do well, and how I am wired,
I don't really understand I suppose I do understand the drive to make people, you have to get a book out every 4 months or something like that. It's mad. The effort that goes into writing a good book. If you want it to be a good product, then that seems crazy to me. And as you say, the amount of stress it must involve. But also from the reader's point of view, do they really want books every 4 months? There's other books to read as well. So,
and I think the idea is to train the reader to to keep
Yeah,
looking for your
they
next
don't
book.
forget
And
you, I
just,
suppose.
they
Yeah, yeah,
keep
yeah.
pre-ordering, and you're
Yeah.
in their cycle. And there's, I think, as I'm saying that, I accept where I'm at. I also accept that, like, I am very privileged. My partner has a day job, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
it provides health insurance. Like, my job certainly pays for things in our household, my writing, but it's not critical put food on the table stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and and for the people who do need to make a full-time living, like, there is much more stress and hustle, and there is a sense of, like, even just each book has a certain amount of earning potential at launch. And so if you need more than you're going to get from one, then you're going to need to do 2 or 4 or 6 or whatever
Yeah,
the
I
magic
suppose
number
so.
is.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I am not, I cannot possibly judge. I think it's such a difficult thing to have to choose between, are you writing full time? Are you working? If you're working, do you have time to write then? Like, how do you choose?
Yeah.
And every person has to make their decision. I am thankfully in a space where I can be like, I will do what I can juggle with, like, full-time momming.
Yeah.
um, and be okay with however I sell. Obviously doing all the promotional marketing things I can.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a trick.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as you say, everyone has to decide that it's like your, how often do you write? What's your process? You have to
Mhm.
find your own routine, your own
Yeah.
thing that is sustainable, I think,
Mhm.
with all of this. And you said there, obviously, there's the 4th book to be done, but
Mhm.
you did say you had other ideas as well. I mean, how developed are these ideas? Have you started scratching down ideas, or are they just in your head just now?
Yeah, no, I have 2 journals running with ideas for 2 different stories that I really would love to write. I think the one that I most want to get to is actually taking me back to the fairy tale retelling world, but a different twist on it. And I want to write a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but it would be uh, set in a post-apocalyptic dystopian United States, and a gender-swapped version where a young woman accidentally wakes up a Jinn Lord from cryogenic
Right.
sleep,
Okay.
who's put in sleep for very good reasons. And so it's this kind of post-apocalyptic, the supernatural creatures have come out of the cracks and smacked down humanity, and now we're 80 years out from that happening. And we have this Jinn Lord who was put in sleep for very good reasons, and we kind of unfurl the story
Cool.
from there about what's going on. So it's fun and different. I've never written dystopian, and so it keeps kind of knocking at the door,
Yeah.
and I keep
Yeah.
making notes, and I have a few scenes written. But I'm like, I cannot write you until I finish the series.
I know that's what happens though. When you're writing one thing, you suddenly have a great idea for the other one. It's always the case. What was the last book that you read?
Ooh, what is the last book I read? Well, I can tell you what I'm reading right now, but I
Hmm.
have a terrible memory, so I can't tell you what I last read. I'd have to go and look at my Kindle.
No, that's fine.
But I'm reading a book called The Order of Grimm, which I have right here.
Okay, cool.
And I this is super fun. I got to meet the narrator for my Thorn series a month or 2 ago when I was traveling to Seattle, Washington. And I had not realized that she had since also become an author. And so I
Right,
very
okay.
happily picked up this book from her. Her name is Shiromi Arcerio, and it's right up my alley because it's got this fairy tale aspect to it. But it's this idea of that the time of, like, the fairy tale godmothers has passed, and now magic is either, you're extremely wealthy and you have enslaved magic users, or you're in hiding because you
Right.
have magic and you don't want to be enslaved. And there is it's like a big heist story. It's really
Cool.
fun.
I always like a
Yeah.
heist story. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. What about the last film that you watched?
Oh, I am blanking. We have been watching a lot of shows lately.
Uh,
We watched a bunch of the Great Canadian Baking Show. Actually, I know it's
right.
the Great
Okay.
British Bake Off. Or whatever. This is the Canadian one,
Okay.
and we were laughing really hard because like the judges are just so nice and polite, and they're like, "Oh, this crumb could have been just a little drier, or a little more moist, or whatever it is, so nice." And I thought, we're used to the American version and the British version where they'll be like, well, what happened here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I
One of
often
them, yeah,
on these reality shows, I often find like the American ones are the worst. They want the drama, so
they want the dramas.
they
Yeah,
create the situation where it can be the judges, going through the person basically for
yeah.
what they've produced.
And then the British ones are so much fun, but like the kind of almost dry kind of
Yeah,
like that particular humor, but also like we're not going to pull our punches when we tell
yeah,
you what's
quite
wrong
cutting
with
as
this thing,
well.
right? Like
Yeah,
we're gonna tell you.
yeah.
And then we watched the Canadian one, and they're like, there was one lady whose cake literally fell apart as she was putting it on a platter. And the judge was like, "Oh, it looks like it had some challenges making it to the plate, but it just tastes so good." I was like, "How could you say that more nicely?"
I mean, does anyone lose, or do they just keep everyone in the show?
They
every
do,
week?
they do,
Yeah,
they do lose, and the judges are so sad to send people home. It's just really like it was so heartwarming to watch this. I was
yeah.
like, "Okay, this is it, right?" If you really want all of the feel goods, watch the Canadian version.
There you go. I'm sure we're able to on Netflix or something.
Yeah.
And then the very, very last bit that we normally do is a very quick fire either or. Tarek always says there is no right answer apart from one. But we'll start with urban fantasy or high fantasy.
Hi.
TV or cinema.
Cinema? Kind
Okay.
of.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. Don't worry. That's Tarek being silly.
Don't
Don't
quote
need
me
to
on
worry
that
about
one.
the right answer. That's fine. Night owl or early bird?
Night owl.
Music or no music when you're writing?
No music.
And last one, paper book or ebook?
Oh. Well, if I love it enough, it's a paper book.
Okay.
But ebooks are easier. They're quicker and faster easier to take around. I actually take my cat for walks, which is to say that he's on a leash and we wander through flower beds together.
Right. Okay.
And he loves, so and like right before the show, that's what I was doing is I took him out for a walk because he's been begging me since I woke up to take him outside. And so when you're walking a cat, you're mostly just standing, and then you move 5 feet, and then you're standing. So I'll take my ebook reader with me,
Yeah.
and it's much easier than carrying a physical book. It's just
Yeah,
much
yeah.
lighter. So yeah, there's a mobility aspect to
You'll be
e-readers.
pleased to hear that Tarek would say that is the right answer because he wants people to say ebook. Hardly anyone says ebook. So,
Well, and again, if I love the book and I want, then I'll want it on my shelf and I'll buy a paper
yeah.
edition too.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, thanks very much, Intisar, for coming on to the podcast. I enjoyed that chat. I know you weren't part of it, Tarek. Again, I mean, there seem to be a lot of it recently.
I'm more of a part-time co-host.
Exactly.
Fair weather.
But no, it was an interesting chat, and it is always interesting hearing about someone who's often people think the publishing path is a sort of once you get onto it, it's a smooth.
Yeah.
It's like a ski lift. It's taking you to the top of the mountain, but unfortunately, you can fall off the ski lift. Many places to fall off the ski lift in the publishing world, and it's I think. You have to. We talk about resilience in terms of making it into the industry, but you also need resilience when you're in the industry as well.
Yeah. I think that's a
to
fair
keep
point.
going with it.
Yeah.
So, and Intisar's definitely shown that. So, we'll put a link to her books that you can pick those up. I'll put that link in the podcast description. But in just a few days, because this is another 2-episode week, we have another fantasy author.
We do indeed. We are chatting with the fantastic M.H. Indi, who we spoke with at the Chimera Festival a month ago now. June?
Yeah, about that. Just over. Well, by the time this episode goes out, nearly 2
months. Yeah, but it was so it's a live episode we did, which is a lot of fun. We do
in
these
front
kind
of a
every
live
year.
studio
Live
audience.
studio audience, exactly. With questions, we had a mic just for the audience members to ask questions, to record them, and we've done this every year for the last 3-4 years now at Chimera.
Yeah.
It's always a fun episode. I think we get the audience involved in the room with the author, and it's a really nice atmosphere. And she's a great person to chat with. Lots of good fun discussions about Star Wars, fantasy, or sci-fi. Who knows?
And also a lot of chat about Final Fantasy.
A lot of Final Fantasy chat. So if you're a video game fan, if you're a Final Fantasy fan, you're going to look forward to this one. If you're not, sorry.
Yeah, so no, please do tune in for that one, even if you're not, because it is a good chat. It's an interesting chat as well. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please do take the time to rate and review us on your favourite podcast app, as that helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast. I mentioned at the start that we're part of a network. That's just a new thing, Step Podcasts.
Yep.
Please do give us a follow on Step Podcasts on Blue Sky or Instagram, so that you can keep up with our new shows, particularly the new combined show that we're doing, or the new joint show with Nadine Matheson as well, which is on its own separate podcast feed. That's why I'm mentioning it. And I mentioned our Patreon at the start as well, so please check that out as well.
Absolutely. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can always get in touch with us by sending us an email to podcast@rightgear.co.uk. You can go into the various social media networks, search for UK Page 1, search for Step Podcast, search for Right Gear, search for us.
Don't search for Right Gear, because you won't
don't really
find
post finger. Don't search for Right Gear. We should never have done right. That was a mistake. The whole Right Gear thing was a mistake. Anyway, go onto YouTube, find our YouTube channel, leave a comment if it's a nice comment. If it's a not nice comment, don't leave anything. Follow us,
Yes,
all that kind of stuff. Just we're always here. We're looking to come and chat. If you join the Patreon, you can join the Discord. You can come and chat in the Discord. You know, we are awaiting. We're awaiting you.
And
creepy.
we are very approachable as well. Please join us in a couple of days for that new episode, which is a good one, and we'll speak to you then.
See you later.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here, or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening and join us for the next episode.
See you later.